a combination of climate conditions, and we've had in the Caribbean very heavy rainfalls in the past couple of years. The rainfall, to give an example, has affected Colombia's cocoa harvest by 20%. And so it almost decimated our cocoa production in Trinidad.
Hello and welcome to the conversation. I'm Eleanor Sakarnaid, and today I'm speaking to Ashley Parasram, who is the head of the T&T Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company. So today we're going to be talking about adding value in country, specifically your example, and then we can talk about the general processes people should be looking to. So how important do you believe it is actually to add value from raw material, from cocoa in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about our project. First of all, the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company is essentially a public-private partnership established in 2013 with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Its sole aim is to rehabilitate what is a defunct cocoa sector. It is for us, cocoa was 100 years ago the primary stay of Trinidad and Tobago, producing 30,000 tons. Today, it only produces around 400 tons, and a large part of that decline is due to the oil and gas industry that has taken root in Trinidad and Tobago. So our job is to stimulate and reinvigorate that sector.
And diversify the economy as a result back to traditional.
Yes, it's part of the government's diversification plan, and they really want to find alternatives to support the oil and gas economy income.
Of course. So what would you suggest? Because I covered Ghana many years ago, and of course I understand Ghana and Ivory Coast, their neighbours, are responsible for some 70% of the world's cocoa production. And there's this problem of them sending raw material straight out.
Well, I think it's been interesting recently in the news that Ghana has, in relation to exporting of beans to Switzerland, put in a condition of or restricting the export of raw material with the intent of stimulating in-country value-added processing. I think it's worth remembering that, in the 450 years of having cocoa in Trinidad and Tobago, and for many hundreds of years, nay, thousands of years of cocoa originating from Central America, we've sort of lost out in that region with being able to capitalize on that crop. And so what you've got is effectively bulk cocoa, which is where you get Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana producing the bulk cocoa, but a lot of the fine flavor cocoa comes from the Caribbean region, and effectively out of the 20 countries the International Cocoa Organization deemed fine flavor, almost 80% of them are from the Caribbean and Central America. And so there's a great opportunity for us to use the higher value cocoa markets to stimulate some of this agricultural resurgence.
So speaking of the fine cocoa, we also saw in the news a few weeks ago the shortage of cocoa in Europe, and so a surge in price. Now, is that partly due to poor crops, climate issues in West Africa, for example, if the bulk of it's coming from there? And then we'll go back to adding value and how we can manage that. But what's causing this surge in price of the beloved chocolate?
Well, I think there's a number of factors, but definitely, there's a combination of climate conditions, and we've had in the Caribbean very heavy rainfalls in the past couple of years. The rainfall, to give an example, has affected Colombia's cocoa harvest by 20%. And so it almost decimated our cocoa production in Trinidad because we had such a low quantity of it. So we've got a challenge from climate change, but we've also got a challenge in terms of increasing demand. And you've got a challenge also in terms of sustainable procurement. So there's a number of things that are converging at once that is really making a almost quarter on quarter increase on the bean price. And that's what we call the New York bean price. where it's the bulk cocoa traded, but then it really does push up the price. If we look at from 1,500 US dollars a ton, ideally from bulk cocoa, fine flavor cocoa could be almost 6 to 7,000 US dollars a ton, and it is increasing. So it's, you know, almost a fourfold difference.
Wow. Then comes, of course, the idea of who gets the benefit of that increased price or surge in price. Ultimately, I'm thinking, you know, in your case, at the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company, if you add value to your product before export, then maybe you can recoup on that price. If I'm thinking farmers in West Africa, they're sending raw product only. Are they losing out? Is it hitting them the hardest, or is it the consumer? Who's being hit the hardest?
Well, definitely it's the farmer. I think it's clear that between 3 and 5% of the product value goes back to the farmer, if that, in terms of the African model.
Mhm.
You've got a very fragmented, complex procurement structure in West Africa regarding cocoa. I know there's been various efforts being made using blockchain and traceability systems and various sort of initiatives around looking at transparency to that process. It's very interesting, however, that on one hand you have this need to look at in-country value added. However, some of your, you know, your main cocoa buyers would say, well, we want to control the primary processing of the product and secondary processing of the product to ensure quality, which tends to be the excuse that a lot of the companies make for saying, well, I'll only purchase raw materials. So it's a very good question to say, well, why don't you have some of these larger companies based in Europe actually having a value-added processing facility in the country of origin? So those are sort of very interesting questions. I think recently in last year, when the EU in invoked the Deforestation Act, there's now a risk of I think it's something like many millions of tons of cocoa sitting waiting to be cleared to enter Europe, but they have not been able to confirm that they are from a location that is not contributing to deforestation. So that's something that is an issue as well, that is acting effect a barrier to market. So more and more origins and more sources are going to have to ensure that they have proof of where the cocoa comes from.
Thank you. So how does the model work for you to see how we can perhaps help other countries revive their cocoa industry or other agricultural products?
I think looking at it from our model is slightly different, well, quite different from the West African model, purely because of volume. What a lot of the Caribbean islands, Central America, some of the Pacific islands also have are unique varieties. The Trinitario variety, which is one of the three key varieties in cocoa, originated from Trinidad. So Trinitario, Tario, Latin meaning of origin of Trinidad. That variety is there in Trinidad, and we have over 100 types of that variety. So it really is like a wine map of France. You know, when you look at the cocoa map of Trinidad, it's that complex. And so when you think of that, what we've got is quality, genetic quality, and a bit like Panamanian geisha coffee, which is sold at a very premium price for its very fruity floral characteristics. We have a very fruity floral cocoa characteristic flavor profile. So we're sort of taking the route of fine flavor coffees, a bit like Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee that sells for a premium. But I think we could do even better, as you were saying, to have value added in country, to engage a lot of our local communities in that value added processing, and provide training to the local community groups where they are able to grow the cocoa and yield the benefit directly from the cocoa product. And that is coupled with an extensive sort of agri-tourism component, so that actually you're not just looking at the origin of a material, but you're also looking at the experience that you could provide to the consumer, especially if you're in the Caribbean, or Central America, or in the Pacific, where you can attract visitors and tourists to engage in that experience. But what we're trying to do is demonstrate how the model can work. And this, if you're making sea salt in the Grenadines or sea moss in St. Lucia, these are sugar in Barbados. These are all unique products from the region that you can effectively apply the same methodology. So that's something we're very excited in. And we hope that it will be a model that we can then put forward to throughout the Caribbean region.
Thank you. You gave an interview about this IP. So can we talk about that and the importance of it for your business and for the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company, and for any business really?
I think it's very important, especially when you're looking at unique products or unique experiences, you're really storytelling, and it's important that you protect that story. And so for us, one of the things that we are really focused on, we work closely with the Trinidad and Tobago Intellectual Property Office. We have worked very closely with the World Intellectual Property Office in Geneva, and the EU Intellectual Property Office in Alicante. And effectively, what we have done is to look at a number of tools, both in terms of our domestic legislation for trademark industrial design, the EU in relation to the Madrid Protocol. The Madrid Protocol is really to protect in key markets, almost 120 signatory countries, I believe, could be even more, that when you make a single application through the Madrid process, and that will cover those countries simultaneously. And we've also used the EU office in Alicante to look at IP advice in relation to key export markets, which would be, for us, China. So we've actually trademarked directly as well, so through Madrid, but also directly to China, our trademark, to ensure that the brand is protected before we go into the market.
How important is that in terms of trading with specific countries? Is that more of a concern with some parts of the world than others? Or is that just something that should be done generally to protect your product?
All the EU advisors we've spoken to would say, please protect your product before you go into market, effectively before you even make people aware you're going into market, which I do understand. When you're an SME in the Caribbean, it's not a priority that often comes straight to mind. So there is a challenge to get people to understand the importance of protecting. But to give an example of really exporting to China, we attended the China International Import Expo in November 2023 as part of the Trinidad delegation with the trade minister from Trinidad and Tobago. And there we signed an MOU with the Shanghai Corporation, which is effectively Orient Holding Corporation, and Hainan, the Hainan Botanical Gardens, on a joint project. Now, these are projects that are looking to develop products for the Chinese market, as well as enter into and distribute those products throughout China. And it's a fantastic partnership. However, it's very important that even when we are discussing those points, that our brand and the trademark of the brand, and in some cases even industrial design of your packaging, is addressed. Because I have been advised through actually the Trademark Association in the US that in China specifically there has been a pattern of individuals trademarking your brand as you've entered the market if you've not done so already, and therefore holding you to ransom. So there is a risk, and it seems to be something that happens in China, not many other places, but it's something to be aware of. So for that reason, we've made sure that those trademarks were protected in advance to market entry.
Okay. And so what do we expect from China as a major global buyer and producer? Their partnering with you? What can we expect for Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company in
Well,
terms of clientele?
very exciting possibilities. I think the most impressive part of what we've discussed during the visit, and this was really looking at um, the existing relationship between China and the Caribbean, but more specifically with Trinidad and Tobago. Next year, we'll see the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Trinidad and Tobago and China. So there will be a host of events celebrating that. But also, we will have the opportunity to look at developing niche products for the market, really around what the Chinese palate looks like for Trinidad cocoa. And for us, that really is a new market in China. The average consumption of chocolate is 50 grams per person per year. So it's very small, but it is increasing. It is a new offering in the marketplace, but also 70% of the population is online. They can buy online. So most of your commerce, you really don't need to invest in any retailing assets. It's really online, next day delivery, very efficient. And I think that for me is, and with Shanghai, of a population of 100 million, is enough to get our cocoa sector up and running. It's a consistent demand that is very simple to treat with. And as long as I say you've addressed the issues of things such as intellectual property, there is a lot of opportunity, which is, I think, much more reassuring from where we sit than the European market, which is undergoing a lot of food price increases and cost of living challenges, which I think it makes it more difficult to achieve the same objective.
Of course, and for they're not luxuries per se, but perhaps your product is. If it's refined cocoa, is it priced as more of a luxury item than a Mars bar? It must be, I imagine.
It is, and I think that is the difference. The pricing and the market placement is very different, and you would see that in China you've got a very strong interest in luxury goods. I know that Louis Vuitton, for example, have got a strong presence in their range of brands that they cover in China. Bentley has done very well. Wines, whiskies are there. A large number of countries that attended the Chinese International Import Expo were really around food and beverage. So there's definitely an interest in the finer things, and I think because we've got, as I say, not a huge volume of fine flavored chocolate, it's something that we can be very tailored and focused on, and that's very much where the strategy is. I think for us, we are very excited because it allows us to generate foreign exchange for Trinidad and Tobago, have the export trade that we're looking for, but most of all have a consistent model that we could build an ongoing agricultural program around. So that consistency of market is a key component to leveraging the support you need to get to what you want to go to, rather than a lot of the traditional markets, if I could say the US or UK or Europe, can be still very volatile, even in the luxury sector or in the mainstream sector, in the kind of confectionery chocolate world. So here's something that actually is very appealing. And I think a lot of Caribbean islands see this particular market as a very appealing market.
Interesting. And obviously, so supply and demand. So if you're premium product and there's low supply globally, then obviously you can up the price. Speaking of global supply and demand, we also know that trade routes have changed, or some are currently being blocked for various reasons. And does that affect your product getting to market, or it's just a delay that everyone's dealing with? A few weeks delay, I understand. The latest shipping lanes issue and terrorism in the oceans. Is that affecting you at all? Does proximity to market therefore become a problem, or if China's not your immediate neighbor?
Well, it's very interesting, but China has taken quite an active role in the Caribbean region. Um, Trinidad was the first signatory to the Belt and Road Initiative, and as part of that particular favored status, there seemed to be there was an investment on building a very extensive industrial park and shipping facility in Trinidad connecting to China. So for us, in terms of actual operational logistics, it's a very convenient distribution link, shipping link. We have already shipped 4 tons of cocoa mass to Hainan on the south coast, which the island in 2025 will be designated an entire duty-free island. But Hainan, the Hainan Botanical Gardens, which grow a handful of our varieties of Trinitari cocoa, it has the processing facility there to make value-added products. The reason we shipped cocoa mass as opposed to finished chocolate is simply to try see how the shipping would work, and it arrived in China last week in very good condition. So we know that test has gone well, and we've launched a product with the Hainan um, Institute at the Trade Expo. So far it looks quite a good infrastructure. So we don't envisage shipping per se to be a challenge um, to that specific market.
Mhm.
And obviously we're watching very carefully at the moment regarding the recent uncertainties with regards to Venezuela and Guyana. But we're hoping that will come to a sensible conclusion. But obviously that can be one of the external disruptors.
Thank you very much. Besides me now needing to go and find myself some chocolate very quickly, um, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to cover?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit of it. I think that one of the key things that we find very interesting, and especially when we look at climate change issues, adaptation, the impacts of COVID in the Caribbean region, um, food security is obviously at the top of the list. Access to water resources, managing our resources is key. So historically, yes, tourism has been the key driver in the region. Probably not so much for Trinidad and Tobago, but I think it will increasingly be. But food security, and I know that Guyana has also been in that discussion as part of the CARICOM 25% food security by 2025, which is quite ambitious. But essentially, to achieve that objective, you need a secure external market. And I think that it's very interesting when you look at the challenges that Africa has regards to the cocoa sector and and the challenges they have with their US and European market, and the offering that China is placing with regards to cocoa and other commodities from the Caribbean market. It's a very compelling state of play, but something that I'd like to think has a benefit to the food security objective.
Thank you very much.